Good morning. It's great to be here with you again, and I just count it a real blessing and a privilege to be able to share. Sometimes when God things puts things in our hearts, and we go through certain things, we often think they're just for us, but as I've realized, a lot of other people go through the same things, so it's great to be able to share. I was sharing a little while ago, and we shared about pride, and as we shared about that, I thought that as I'd prayed, God showed and exposed pride in my heart and different things. And I thought, well, okay, then He's shown me quite a few things which were in the last radio program. But as I went on, there's a few other things that's come up. So I would just want to encourage you that if you pray for God to expose pride in your heart, then it doesn't come with a warning, but be aware that if He does do that, there might be some things that you're not quite you know that there could be things that come up that you're not really aware that they're in us. So I just wanted to read first of all a scripture on Proverbs 16:18, and it's one that we often think that says pride goes before a fall, but that's not what the word says. It said pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. So pride, there is a destructive force in pride, obviously, and but the haughty spirit, that's the manifestation of pride in our heart, and you can see that in people, and basically, and I said this last time, that pride is really the antichrist spirit working, and pride actually spawns a lot of other things, and some of them, is one of them is offense, and the other is anger, and then it can lead to betrayal. And pride is a sense of obviously the self-importance and superiority, the way we think, the way we think about ourselves, and really sometimes just don't consider God worth the knowing because we think we have it all, and that can lead to if we have we get criticisms and slights at us, we have offense. An offense is really feeling hurt or upset by someone's words or actions, often stemming from a belief that your pride has been damaged. And if that carries on, it can lead actually to anger. And that's a strong emotion of displeasure or hostility. And you can see that. I mean, there's a lot being said even about road rage, and you can see the manifestations of pride where there is an offense and then it leads over to anger. And so I just really like to read a scripture here for you, and for me basically, but it's in Psalm 55:12-14. And it says, "For it is not an enemy who reproaches and taunts me, then I might bear it. Not it is one who has hated me, or who instantly vaults himself against me, then I might hide from him. But it was you, a man my equal, my companion, and my familiar friend. We had sweet fellowship together and used to walk to the house of God in company." And if you recognize that, that was a psalm of David. Excuse me. And he was speaking about Ahithophel. He was his trusted friend, his trusted counselor. And along with Absalom, they used to think that every word that came from him was like an oracle of God. He was so trusted. But when you see that what happened, it says they used to walk to the house of God together. And then you see the story as it plays out that there was something that happened in Ahithophel's life that turned him away from that fellowship with David. And he actually went to betray him, which is an outcome of if you let offense go far enough and it turns to anger, then betrayal would come. And you can read about this in 2 Samuel 15, 16, 17. And, about what happens. And basically, Ahithophel's granddaughter was Bathsheba. And it doesn't actually describe this as happening, but somewhere in his heart, he turned from being David's friend, David's counselor. He was the person in David's life to a person that betrayed him. And something created that in Ahithophel's heart and life. And the offense came, I believe, when David started, and it wasn't right. And we know that the way the story played out, but where Bathsheba was basically mistreated by David, and Uriah was sent to the battlefight site to be killed, basically. And so, where that came in, the offense and David's affair with Bathsheba was at the root of it. And if you actually look at that, also, the same thing happened with Judas Iscariot and Jesus, because it doesn't actually say anywhere why Satan entered into his heart and why he betrayed Jesus, but we do know that he was looking after the money purse, and he did collect 30 pieces of silver. But one common thing that both of them had, they both committed suicide, Ahithophel and Judas. So those things that stem from offense are very important to us, and why I started to get looking at offense was something that happened to me after I'd shared last time, actually, about pride in my life. And I was, I have people that work with me, work for me, and people I walk with. And one day I came in to get a piece of equipment and it wasn't there. And somebody else had taken it without telling me or asking me. And I called them, and when I saw them, I thought I was just sort of saying the way it was and what happened, and it was wrong. But, I think in general terms, I maybe let loose a little bit more than I should have done, and I didn't have my heart right. And during the day, I got more and more convicted about what this was. And God said it was anger. It was you're offended, and it was anger in your heart. And I picked up the phone and I arranged to meet the person, and we just walked it through. And I repented to him, because one thing, if you are offended, you need to go back and you need to repent and just clear that, so that your walk can go on. And so what happened was that pride, as I said from before, it rises up as the epicenter of our lives, and anything that challenges it rises to offense. And the piece of equipment, I really needed it that morning, but he didn't ask me, he just took it. So, I felt the justification of saying that. So basically, as I started to look at the offense that was in my heart, I started to study what the word really meant. And I saw that in the Bible, offense is mentioned over 70 times in the Old Testament and the New Testament. But one of the things that I was looking at was that the word offense in Greek is scandalon. And this is what the lexicon, Strong's lexicon, says about it. It says scandalon was originally a trap or a snare used for catching animals. Over time, the term evolved to include metaphorical speaking meanings such as a stumbling block or an obstacle. So you sometimes see offense being shared as a stumbling block, but they're the same thing. They trip up. But what's interesting is it was originally designated as a trap. And I've heard, offense being called the bait of Satan, but I don't think that's the bait of Satan, and here's why. Because the scandalon was basically a branch which was pulled over, and a noose put in it, and some bait sat in it. And if you went for the bait, the trap would catch you. Now, not everybody is familiar with that, but a more familiar one would be like a mouse trap. If you have a mouse trap, a piece of wood and some metal, and springs and different things, it would just sit there. There wouldn't be any creature that would be attracted to that. But if you put cheese, peanut butter, whatever you like on that, it attracts. It is the bait which attracts. But the actual offense, or the scandalon, is the trap that it springs on, and as it springs, it takes you captive. And that's what offense does. It takes you captive in those areas. And so it's very serious. It is very, very serious. I want to just share really out of James 1 verse 15. Let no one say when he's tempted, I'm tempted from God. For God is incapable of being tempted by what is evil, and he himself tempts no one. But every person is tempted, now listen to this, every person is tempted when he is drawn away, enticed, and baited by his own evil desire. Then the evil desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully matured, brings forth death. So the very thing about scandalon is, if you don't get a hold of it and it can manifest, it will lead forth to sin, and it can take you over, and it can take you out. And where it says enticed and baited by his own evil desire, the bait basically of offense is anything that hits your pride or whatever else, or whatever it is, or they didn't speak to me right, or anything like that. And it rises up in you and you have been offended, and the offense comes, but you went and you took the bait. The bait was on the trap, and the offense was when the trap sprung. And that's the way the devil operates. He operates in that way. And we could go back to many, many examples. And the first one that I could even think about was where, in the garden, and Adam and Eve, and they were told just one thing, don't eat from this tree. And the one thing that they did do, because the devil just connived and told them something, and they took from it. Because one thing offense or pride does not like is authority. And the authority of God was don't do it. And they did it. And obviously we're still reaping the, I wouldn't say rewards, but we're reaping the effect of what happened there. And Jesus said in Matthew 18:7, he said, woe to the world because of offences. And that's the same word, scandalon. For offences, scandalon again, must come. But woe to the man by whom the offence comes. So we're also really encouraged. Whatever we do, we've got to have in our hearts that we're not going to cause offence either. And as I started to look through this, I looked at some of the other examples within the Bible. And the one that I started actually looking at was Cain and Abel. And that's in Genesis chapter 4, verses 3 to 11. And it says, and in the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground. And Abel brought of the firstborn of his flock and of the fat portions. And the Lord had respect and regard for Abel and for his offering. But for Cain and his offering, he had no respect or regard. So Cain was exceedingly angry and indignant, and he looked sad and depressed. And if you ever come across somebody that's offended or has offense in them, they look pretty terrible, because they carry it. They can't hide it. It's on their face. It's in their heart. It's the way they express themselves. And somebody can feel like, sad and depressed as Cain did. But the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why do you look sad and depressed and dejected? He says, why are you going through this? If you do well, if you do what's right, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin crouches at your door. Going back to what it's saying in James, its desire is for you, but you must master it. The bait is already set there in the trap for the offense. And there's another translation. It's called the Shocking Bible, Volume 1. There's 5 books of Moses, and it's a more or less a literal translation. And for verse 7, it says this: if you intend good, bear it aloft. But if you do not intend good, at the entrance is sin. And this is what it says: a crouching demon towards you, his lust, but you can rule over him. And that is the bait that is there. Whatever we've given to in our life, I don't know whether it's finance or whatever else, if there's any idolatry that will draw you in a certain direction, whatever it is, that can be the reach of these, the demonic forces to try to get you to take the bait, so the offense of the trap, the scandalon, gets you. And then Cain said to his brother, let's go out into the field. And you know what happened? And when they were in the field, Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and he killed him. And there's just one example that I came across. There are quite a few different examples. And there's another one with Jesus, actually Peter and Jesus, in Matthew 16:23. In verse 20, he said, then Jesus, he said, sternly and strictly charged and warned the disciples to tell no one that he was Jesus the Christ. This was straight after they'd been up to Caesarea Philippi. They had, Jesus had asked everybody, who do they say he is? And Peter had said, you are the Christ. And he said, blessed are you, because God, it was the Father that showed you that. And then straight after that, there was the Mount of Transfiguration. They were up there. And then they went on down the path into Jerusalem. So from that time forth, Jesus began clearly to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem. and suffer many things at the hands of the elders and the high priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised from death. Then Peter took him aside to speak to him privately, and began to reprove him and charge him sharply, saying, God forbid, Lord, this must never happen to you. This is after everything that had happened in Caesarea Philippi, the Mount of Transfiguration, and the road down to Jerusalem. But Jesus, he turned away from Peter and said to him, Get behind me, Satan, you are in my way. That word is scandalon. You are a trap. You are an offence and a hindrance and a snare to me, for you are minding what partakes not of the nature and quality of God, but of men. Why? I thought about that, and why was this a temptation to Jesus? And then I thought that he was in the garden, and he said, Father, if you're willing, remove this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done. He knew what was ahead, but therefore Satan also was trying to get that place to turn the tide. I mean, if Jesus had turned at that point in time, we wouldn't even be having this conversation on the radio. It would be no more. And so what you actually look at there is that when Jesus said that to him, he was saying, you're an offense, you're a trap, and I'm not taking your bait. Basically, that's exactly what he said. And Hebrews 4:15 says, For we do have a high priest who is unable to understand and sympathize and have a shared feeling with our weaknesses and infirmities and liabilities to the assaults of temptation. But he is one who has been tempted in every respect as we are, yet without sinning. And you could go back and look at the temptations in the wilderness, the 3 times. And the temptations were always there to try him to get to take the bait. So the offense, the trap's set, and the rest you can see. And Peter actually said later on, where I think his heart had changed in, a bit, because he spoke about it. He says in 1 Peter 2:8, and a stone that will cause stumbling, and a rock that will give men offense. They stumble because they disobey and disbelieve God's word, as those who reject him were destined and appointed to do. And the offense of the cross is often spoken about as a stumbling block, especially to the Pharisees and the Jews, because they thought they knew what was happening. But the offense of the cross, the stumbling block, was basically that the Jews and the Gentiles were going to come through faith. And that was a big stumbling block to them. In the world that we're living in at the moment, and I don't think anyone is unaware. I mean, when I was young, and I could go back over 70 years, there was a lot of things maybe were wrong if I'd had, more wisdom or, more mature heart at that time. But it didn't seem that anything was anything like what it is now. The characteristics of what is happening around us is a wickedness, and it seems to be endemic throughout the whole world. And in 2 Timothy 3, it says, understand this, that in the last days will come, set in perilous times of great stress and trouble, hard to deal with and hard to bear. For people will be lovers of self and utterly self-centered, lovers of money and aroused by an inordinate greedy desire for wealth, proud and arrogant and contemptuous boasters. They will be abusive and blasphemous, scoffing, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, and profane. They will be without natural human affections, callous, inhuman, relentless, admitting of no truce or appeasement. They will be slanderers, false accusers, troublemakers, intemperate and loose in morals and conduct, uncontrolled and fierce haters of good. They will be treacherous betrayers, rash and inflated with self-conceit. They will be lovers of sensual pleasure, vain amusements, more than and rather lovers of God. And that is an incredible list, but it is coming to fruition before our eyes of what is actually happening within the world. And it says, let no one, in 2 Thessalonians 2:3, let no one deceive or beguile you in any way, for that day will not come The apostasy comes first unless the predicted great falling away of those who have professed to be Christians have come, and the man of lawlessness, sin, is revealed, who is the son of doom. And I've seen this in my life on both sides of the Atlantic. I mean, I come from Scotland, was in church there, and in Sweden, and I've seen it. When people get offended, the ones that you love, the ones that you walk with, the ones that like Ahithophel and David, and then all of a sudden something happens to them, and there is a deception that takes place. They believe some lie, they're offended, it turns to anger, and then they turn away and they start to really attack. And we've seen that here. I've seen that across in Scotland, in churches, and it's becoming more and more prevalent. But this is what it's talking about here. It says, let no one deceive or beguile you in any way, for that day will not come except the apostasy, the great falling away, where people will choose to believe lies. They will choose to become offended. They will choose to let pride be in their hearts and different things. And I just want to read here, Matthew 24. Which is after they'd left Caesarea Philippi, gone down the road, Jesus had addressed something. And he said, and they were in Jerusalem, and they were walking in Jerusalem. This was Jesus with his disciples. And he said to them, do you see all these things? Truly, I tell you, there will be not left here one stone upon another. He's looking at the temple that will not be thrown down. While he was seated on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately and said, tell us, when will this take place? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end, the completion, the consummation of the age? There's two questions there. When will this come? And I have been to the Temple Mount there, and I've seen the big stones. They're huge. They're like 60 foot long. They weigh tons and tons, and you can't even figure out how they even got them there, let alone how they threw them down. But he says, when they were looking at this perfect wall, the temple, the holy place and everything, he said, be careful that no one misleads you, because they will come down and they will deceive you and they will lead you into error. For many will come in the strength of my name, appropriating the name which belongs to me, saying I am the Christ. And they will lead many astray. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars, and see that you're not frightened or troubled, for this must take place. It seems like the whole world at the moment is at war. There's very few places you can think of that's not affected by war. It says you will hear the rumors of war, but one thing it says you're not to be frightened or troubled, for it must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There'll be famines, and you've only got to look at Sudan and what's happening, and even the persecution in Nigeria of Christians and different things all over. It says, and earthquakes. It seems like the mantle of the earth is shaking all over. There's earthquakes every day in some place. It says, but all this is just the beginning, the early pains and the birth pains of the intolerable anguish. Then they will hand you over to suffer affliction and tribulation, and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then it says, and it really doesn't matter what what your theology is, or whether you think we're going to be here when there's a tribulation, or whether we're not. It doesn't, that's not a salvation issue in that sense. But what he's saying is that they will hand you over to suffer affliction. And he says they will persecute you. They persecuted me, they're going to persecute you. And then it says in verse 10, and then many will be offended. The same words, but it's a different verb format. It's scandalized. Many will be offended and repelled, and will begin to distrust and desert him they thought or they ought to trust and obey. And they will stumble and fall away and betray one another. And that's what we're seeing even with our own eyes. But here, I think in the time when the persecution comes, that if you don't stand against the persecution, if you don't stand against the tribulation, then you start to doubt that Jesus, you start to doubt what he's told you, what he said to you. And it says they're not just weak Christians. These are Christians that have walked, and we've walked together as well. And many false prophets will rise up and deceive and lead many to error. You are an open target for deception at that time. And then it says, and the love of the great body of people will grow cold because of the multiplied lawless and iniquity. And the reason I know this is Christians, because the word love is used is agape, which is the love. It's the selfless love, the sacrificial love. It's God's love. It's not like the phileo or the eros or the storgio, the other types of love that's spoken about, when Peter was saying, different things in when Jesus said, "Do you love me?" He used phileo, "Do you love me?" But Jesus said, "Do you agape me?" He said, "No, I phileo you." But this word here was really the highest form of love. It was God's love in us. And he said, the love of the great body of people will grow cold, and they will be offended and repelled, and they will stumble and fall away and betray one another. And we haven't obviously seen that to the full extent of what is coming, but then the security has to be that we are in the shadow of the Most High. We trust, we have faith, we know what God has said. No matter what happens, no what comes, we're going to stand strong. And it's easy to sometimes to talk about this to our friends, or to talk about it in the church, or to talk about different things. But when push comes to shove, and it has, down through the centuries, when people have been martyred, people have been persecuted, people have been hated, people have been trodden underfoot, displaced, taken from their homes, and as it recently happened in Nigeria, 100 Christians just taken out and killed. When that happens, what would we do in that same situation? Are we going to stand strong and believe? But the end of this one here, this chapter 24, it's not the end, but it says in verse 13, "But he who endures to the end will be saved." So you see how important the trap is that Satan can set for us, how he can set that trap that can spring if we get drawn into error, if we get drawn into deceit, drawn into desires and lusts or whatever else. And just as a word of encouragement, I'll just share Philippians 1 verse 10. "So that you may surely learn to sense what is vital," and that is important, "and approve and prize what is excellent and of real value, recognizing the highest and the best, and distinguishing the moral differences, that you may be untainted and pure, and unerring and blameless, so that with hearts sincere and certain and unsullied, you may approach the day of Christ." Listen, not stumbling, nor causing others to stumble. That is so important. This message on pride, anger, offense is one of the ones will take most people out, because they consider themselves to be in a place that they can confront God, and they are open to deception, and they will be deceived. And it says in Proverbs 18:19, it says, "A brother offended is harder to be won over than a strong city, and their contentions separate them like the bars of a council." This is a brother offended, somebody in the church, somebody that you've walked with, somebody that you've loved with, somebody you've spoken with, cried with, laughed with, and then all of a sudden they're not there. And then the next minute they're attacking you. And it may not be everybody that's seen this or experienced it, but over the past 20 years, I've seen it in different churches and different people that I've known. And just, it's so important. I have many other scriptures, and I don't think I'm going to have a lot of time to read on them. The one that is important to me it's just not just in the New Testament, but in Isaiah 8:14-15, it's talking about the Messiah, Mashiach Christ, "And he shall be a sanctuary, a sacred and indestructible asylum to those who reverently fear and trust him." And that's where we've got to go, that we trust him, believe in him no matter what happens. "But he shall be a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense to both the houses of Israel, a trap and a snare to the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And many among them shall stumble thereon, and they shall fall and be broken." Listen, "and be snared and taken." So really, whatever you do, understand what the bait is that attracts you. Understand that that is not the way, and there is a way out, and just keep your faith and your trust in God. And just as we shared today, there's much more on this, but it's been such a blessing to be able to really share it with you and share what happened in my heart, that I wanted to just get over what God showed me about offense and different things. And we air these programs every Sunday morning from 10:30 till 11. And they are also recorded. And if you like to go back and look at some of them, they're actually on video as well. You can go to www.wordoffaithfellowship.org and look for the radio program button. Press that and you'll see many examples and many things that people in the church have shared. And I'm sure you'll be blessed by listening to that. Thank you. Have a great day.